Well, welcome to our final module, Module 6, Enhancing Flow States. Flow is the optimal state of consciousness where we feel our best and perform our best. And why are we wanting to go over this? Because the idea here is that if you can help your client practice being in flow states, they will get through their issues much more quickly. So the flow state research shows that people who utilize these states more frequently have better performance. Now we've given you this animation from what's called the mind mirror that Maxwell Cade invented, that we mentioned in the last module. This is a picture of what he called an awakened mind.
And again, you've got blood flow equalized on both sides.
That's right.
If you notice that the brainwave frequencies are mirroring each other, one side to the other, so it's a very balanced brain state.
That's right. And again, he discovered that we, in fact, can learn how to live like this more often than not. And that's really good news. So I wanted to give you this quote from Anna Wise, who was one of his students. She said that this awakened mind brainwave pattern combines the intuitive, empathetic radar of the delta waves, the creative inspiration, personal insight, and spiritual awareness of theta, bridging capacity, and relaxed, detached awareness of alpha, and the external attention and ability to consciously process thought of beta waves. And you can read the rest of that. Anna Wise did a lot of work with the mind mirror and brought that little device to the States, and it was one of the early biofeedback systems, and it's still being used in the States now. So we've, from time to time, talked about some biofeedback principles that we feel like fit into psychotherapy. And we might mention this before, that any experience that you have had, you only have while you're having a specific brainwave experience or brainwave pattern. If your brainwave patterns change, then your experience changes.
You may remember the event, can describe it, but the emotions, the feeling, the physiological sensations that you have in an experience are tied to the brainwave pattern. Again, state-dependent memory and learning.
Right. So we've given you this little piece of information. Volney Matheson was a pioneer in the discovery that thoughts and feelings were electrical in nature. He found, using lie detectors back in the 1940s, that when people remember certain past events, excuse me, or when a change of mood is induced, the indicator, the needle on the meter, would jump erratically. And so we found this also in our biofeedback systems, that when people were feeling stress, and we could measure temperature on the forehead in one of our systems, that the temperature would go up. And that's kind of interesting. So even Carl Jung used early galvanometers, and he in fact published some information about that in 1904. We've been talking about throughout this course, how do you get your brain to work for you and work better, and how do you access some of your brain superpowers? Well, this is a study done from 2010 that basically said if you squeeze a ball with your left hand, you turn on your right hemisphere. But why would you want to turn on your right hemisphere? You know, if you're writing, if you're trying to produce a creative thought, or if you're painting, this is one thing you can do to make your right hemisphere start producing ideas and images and so forth. So there's some gentlemen in what's called the Flow Genome Project, Jamie Wheel and Stephen Kotler. Stephen's a New York Times bestseller, who wrote Stealing Fire, and they allowed us to use this chart illustration also in our book, The Worry-Free Mind, so we really appreciated that. And the stages of flow really were first written about by Herbert Benson from Harvard. And he talked about how we go into a struggle phase first when we're either trying to make a decision about something or we're working on a project.
And the struggle is people keep trying to solve a problem within a certain paradigm, but the answer does not lie inside the paradigm. And they keep trying to fit that. The answer may actually lie outside the particular paradigm.
Mm-hmm.
And so people are in high beta, not just regular beta between 12 and about 20. They're in high beta because they're trying to make something happen. It's like trying to make themselves relax, trying to make themselves meditate, try to make themselves understand. The answer lies outside the paradigm. With meditation and relaxation, we have to let go of something. And in the Flow Genome Project, what they found was struggle. They would struggle and they'd be frustrated because they could not come up with the answer. The answer was outside the paradigm, and they would release. It was a kind of creative giving up, that you let things go, and at that point, alpha increases, and they begin to get into more of a coherent brain state, and they begin to broaden the paradigm that they're looking through.
That's right, and to just go back to the beta, so and actually it's true for everybody. You cannot make good decisions if you're in that beta worry mind state,
Certainly, yes.
right? Because you're releasing cortisol and norepinephrine, and no good solution ever came out of an anxious mind.
Right.
Yeah. But everybody goes through that. You can only stand to do that for a while, and then you release it, like you said, into alpha, where nitric oxide is released. And then, and you probably know more about this than I do, then you get into flow, where you've got theta, gamma, dopamine, endorphins, anandamide, and a lot of athletic people find themselves in that state, don't they?
Yeah, and you're in a high alpha state, and things just flow or move.
Mm-hmm.
And again, with the issue of trying, I was on a meditation retreat some years ago, and was trying to get myself to enter into a meditative state. And the more I tried, the more I struggled, the harder it was. And I would meet with the monk after every so many meditation sessions, and he was telling me that I was trying and not getting anywhere. So eventually I gave up and just started paying attention. If thoughts came, they came and they went. I wasn't trying to suppress them. Thoughts came, I didn't just latch onto them. They went, and I went back to just focusing on my breath at that time. And there was a release that happened naturally as my alpha created. I stopped trying to be mindful, stopped trying to have insight in what was going on.
Now I recall that story. Didn't the monk give you a rock?
Well, what happened was when I went through the first couple of sessions of the meditation, I thought that I really knocked it. And I went in and saw the monk in our session after we bowed, and I sat in front of the monk. I told him how I had reached this great peak, this wonderful state of insight, and how blissful it was. And he looked at me and said, "You just took a nap. And you're no better than a rock, and a rock can do it better than you do." So he handed me a rock, which absolutely confused me. And I'm wondering, I'm paying money to be on this retreat, but he's handing me a rock. So I went again after with every session of meditation. He had me stare at this rock. Everybody else was either staring at the square circle or staring at the wall. And I was having this battle with this rock, trying to figure out, why did he give this to me? Why am I doing this? And every time I would go in for an interview, he would look at me. I had the shortest interviews he could ever have. He says, you're still fighting with the rock, and the rock's still winning. So again, there was a sense of confusion, this playfulness that he had with me. It was trying to get me to stop, either trying to beat the rock, stop trying to get to insight, and also, at the same time, not take a nap sitting up. Well, eventually, I gave up. I just started paying attention to thoughts that came in my mind, that came and went, and I would stare at the rock, and just let that go and begin to pay attention to paying attention.
Right.
So I went in for the last interview with him, and by that time I had begun to get the idea of what it meant to be present in the here and now. So he noticed a change when I went into the interview, and he then said to me, how are you doing? And I said, I'm sitting here, watching my thoughts come and go, paying attention to my breath, and when my mind wanders, I gently just bring it back where it was. And then he says, wants to make sure, he says, how's the rock doing? Because I had been in this death struggle with this rock, and I picked the rock out of my pocket, handed it to the monk. He smiled, took it, and bowed. So again, there's this sense of release, of struggle, of trying to do something, trying to meditate. You can't try to meditate. You're not trying to reach any state. You pay attention to what's going on. Pay attention to your mind, not latch onto a thought, just pay attention, and then let it go and go back to focusing on the breath.
And this is then you get into the flow,
Yes.
and flow is this wonderful feeling of you're unified. There's no separate self. You're between who you are and what you're doing, and
Let's talk about the collapse of duality.
yeah, and it's true with any activity. And it's true with any process we go through this, and then finally you can only stay in flow for so long, and then you break out of that into delta, so you go even deeper, and you release serotonin and oxytocin in delta, and you're kind of in a recovery stage until you kind of begin to go back into this.
Right, and from the flow state becomes a new paradigm. But once it becomes a paradigm, it helps you understand some things. But again, to move beyond that, the paradigm has to collapse, and you're in the struggle trying to make a paradigm work for things that it doesn't work with.
And so we just wanted to give you the way to think about this process, one way to think about it. So we can help clients move into that state more quickly. We'll talk about that in a moment. But you'll recall Abraham Maslow, who developed his pyramid and talked about the peak experiences, or that was a flow state he was really talking about. And the state's been considered the source code of intrinsic motivation, with the focus on self-regulation, self-awareness, and psychological flexibility. Isn't that really what we're really ultimately trying to help clients develop? So when you inhale, you activate the sympathetic system. Your heart rate increases. When you exhale, you activate the parasympathetic system, and your heart rate decreases. And this is why learning how to breathe appropriately is very useful, because you're learning how to regulate your nervous system. Well, we were in Scotland a few years ago with my choir, and we came upon, we were exploring Edinburgh, which is a beautiful city. We came upon this geodesic dome that had been constructed down below a hill. Up on the hill was a castle.
Right.
And it looked very interesting, and we peeked inside.
Right, we could see from the outside in as we walked over, and there were these kids just bouncing back and forth, doing flips and turns. Oh, that looks neat. So we went over there and found that if we waited a while, people would then finish their turn, and then we could go. And what they did was a tall bungee cord, and we were strapped in to the bungee cord, and there were these little trampolines that were underneath, and they didn't let us do the flips that the children were doing. I guess we looked a little bit too old and stiff at that time. But what we began to do is to bounce up and down, for 3 minutes off these trampolines and go way up, maybe 15, 20, 30 feet in the air and come back down again. It was some kind of almost flipping. The bungee cord wouldn't let us turn completely over. We did that for a period of 3 minutes.
That's all.
And what was interesting is after we did that, and that helped us, we went and sat down outside the dome for a while, and we realized that we had been in a peak state, in a flow state. And we could not develop a worry thought. Carol does not like to fly, and Carol particularly does not like to fly over water. Well, when you go from Scotland back to the United States, you got to fly across the Atlantic Ocean. So you're going to be over water for a good long period of time. And unlike going east, we were going west, so we're not going to be there overnight in the airplane. And try to get Carol to think a worry thought about flying. Could not happen. And for about 3 or 4 hours afterwards, we tried to we could think of something that would normally worry us, but we could not have the feelings that went with that. There was no worry at all.
And so what a great experiment that was, that even though we tried to worry, it was impossible. We did try.
Yes, we did.
So it's more information, again, about how your brain works, and if you can do some physical exercise where you're, even for 3 minutes, where you're getting your heart rate up, you're getting these chemicals to fire off, and you go through that process very quickly we just talked about, and then you're in this flow state, and it can be extended and expanded.
And we thought initially that maybe it was because we'd taken in a lot of oxygen, but we're in really good cardio shape. And so bouncing up and down while fun was not all that challenging cardiovascularly. So we weren't really breathing that hard, even though we were having fun bouncing on these trampolines and going up with the bungee cords. But it really had to do with the experience, brain-wise, of flow, rather than just getting more oxygen in the brain.
That's right. So you can learn to stimulate flow yourself. Remember a time you entered flow. You know, you could have been doing anything, dancing, singing, painting, anything creative, walking in nature. Deep states of contemplation can stimulate flow. So in Scotland, for example, we were in a cathedral because the choir was singing a lot. And over in Europe, they have these amazing cathedrals that just, you walk in it and you just feel yourself make a shift, and it's really interesting. So you're in a flow state there. Any kind of fun activity or performance. Well, so some of the research shows something very interesting, that when you're in a flow state, you are 500%, get that, 500% more productive, and you can solve complicated problems by 400%. And you start to have more synchronistic experiences. So you start to notice things showing up in unusual times and places that are meaningful to you. So we love this state of flow because it's pretty easy to accomplish. So we call this another name, the Neureka state of mind, because what happens in flow often is suddenly you can have an insight. Suddenly you can have a sense of clarity, an idea about how to put things together in a way that you haven't figured it out before. And if you're writing, it feels like a download. So, you know, the Worry-Free Mind book, we got a contract, as you recall.
Oh, yes.
And, you know, I can't see up close very well, so our agent said to us, "Did you read the fine print?" And I said, "Not really." And she said, "Well, you know, they're wanting you to turn this in." How many months?
Well, we got the contract in March, and they were wanting most of it in June, and the rest of it could be done in September. But about 5 of the 6 chapters that we're supposed to write need to be done in about 3 months.
3 months. And we went, oh, wow, really? And so we thought, well, let's go for it.
We just started to play.
We started to play. We put ourselves in a flow state.
First off, in flow state, trance state, alpha theta state,
Mm-hmm.
and our cat that we had at that time was a cute Burmese. Would come and sit with us
Yeah.
while we were writing the book.
Right. And it was almost like a download. You hear people talk about that. It's almost like it wasn't hard at all. Things just went like this. And so that was a very interesting experience. And so most people have that at some point, maybe not writing, but in some other form or fashion. So, or if you're in nature, you can start to feel a sense of unity with all things, and that's a flow state. And then interesting ideas start to come to you. So what happens though when you're really in flow, brain-wise? Well, stress hormones are flushed out. Your sense of past and future disappears, and you're only in the moment. Your self sort of vanishes for a while. The part of the brain called the dorsal lateral shuts down, and this happens to be where your inner critic is. And the flow state knocks out your default mode where rumination and your critical mind activates. So that's really cool. The flow state also can stimulate regeneration of telomeres. And so, again, we've got some really nice physiological information about that. So you can create these flow states in everyday life, and you talked about meditation and athletics.
Right.
I'm reminded of the story about Tom Brady better than I at the Super Bowl. They were faltering, and it seemed like the team wasn't doing very well.
Right, and this is not this one, they did lose, but
Yeah.
Brady, more than any other quarterback, was able to bring the team back. Of course, he had good receivers,
Right.
good blockers, good running backs, but Brady was able to bring the team back in the last 2 or 3 minutes of the game. And what happens, and Tom Brady loves this, that he wanted to be on the field when his team was behind and to bring them back
Mm-hmm.
in the last minute or so
Mm-hmm.
in the game. And good athletes find this a challenge,
Mm-hmm.
and they get more and more and more focused. Think about a quarterback standing back there in the pocket, and all these guys, 250, 300 pounds, coming at him. And Brady was really good at noticing when he got close enough, he would just step up into the pocket or begin to move to the side.
What did he do mentally, do you think?
But he was focused on one receiver, another receiver, another receiver.
Yeah.
And his job was to get the ball to somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
And even if they dropped the ball, he would just go back through that, imagining they would catch the ball. But he was aware that when somebody got close to him, he would just step aside or up into the pocket. So he was very, very much aware. And he wasn't thinking, he wasn't trying. He was just taking the information as it came in. This is true with all good athletes.
Mm-hmm.
I worked a lot with pole vaulters. And pole vaulting is not an activity you can think about when you're doing it. You can go through all sorts of exercise, all sorts of training of using different thicknesses and strengths of poles and get your rhythm down. Once you start, you have to then just let it happen.
And don't you go into the flow?
You go into a flow state.
Yeah.
If you don't make it, if you don't clear the bar, again, that you're able to view that as a challenge, and then think about, what do I need to change? It is after you go through the process. You think about, make adjustments, and then you go on the runway, and you just go on automatic. So you're high alpha, you're in a flow state, and it happens again naturally.
And so I've had great experiences working with singers and other musicians. And I recall a time I was working with an organist who had a familial tremor. And every time he would watch his hand shake, he would get more anxious and think that it was anxiety. So his interpretation of something physiological happening led him to a negative state of mind. And I said to him, you know, when you sit down on the bench, I'd like you to think about how you and the organ and the choir and the congregation are all one. You and the music are connected, and there's no separation. And as he began to practice that, he just flipped into flow, and the familial tremor went away.
I had that with the violist. I was working with her. She again had a familial tremor. We found out when we were doing hypnosis. In the hypnosis, there was no tremor. So as she would begin to learn to do this without looking like she was in trance, just a highly focused flow state, there was no tremor, and she was able to perform to her best. Originally, she came to me because she was anxious about performing in competitions and in certain recitals. Well, she actually learned to play the viola in what we would call then a flow, hypnotic state. It really was a flow state.
Right.
No tremor,
Right.
and she would go in. In fact, she had a performance, and her mother sent me a tape of that. She says, "Can you see where she went into trance?" We would now say went into flow.
Mm-hmm.
She was able to turn that sense, that feeling in the brain,
Right.
would let her just let it happen. As she practiced a lot, you're not going to perform very well if you don't have one the talent, to if you haven't practiced a whole lot.
Exactly.
So just being in flow doesn't assure
That's right.
that you're going to do something well. If you practice, and then you find yourself tensing up, that's when you learn how to switch the brain, switch alpha on, so it becomes higher, and you're in the flow state, and you perform to your best.
That's right.
Again, there are physiological changes. Again, with your organist and my violist, the familial tremor, which had just a slight tremor, went away in the flow state.
And so again, we're treating frequency with frequency,
Right.
if you think about it in that way. And so we've given you some suggestions, if you want to use some physical exercise of how to shift into flow. Take a flow hike. Stephen Kotler talks about this. You walk uphill 20-25 minutes. You run uphill the next 5 minutes, and you're getting endorphins and anandamide released. Then you run down the hill. You get dopamine released. And then you begin to recognize patterns, like where you're going to put your feet, how you're going to lean into if you're on a hill, what you're going to do with the kind of surface that you're walking on. And then you can do that and come home and experience creative problem solving. It's pretty interesting. So I remember what was the name of that TV show with the guy that comes up with solutions to problems with using materials that don't work together.
MacGyver.
MacGyver, thank you.
Right, you go out with a pencil and a paper clip and build a whole car.
Exactly right. And so the writer of the series was interviewed, and he talked about how he would get blocked. It was kind of stressful because he had to come up with a storyline every week, and that's really hard to do. And so he'd kind of get blocked and not know where to go. And the first thing he would do is go take a shower. And the second thing he would do is go take a walk in nature. And he would come back and things would pop into his mind about what to do. It's really a very extraordinary ability, and we think of this as a superpower. So
Albert Einstein came up with many of his major theories of relativity when he was a patent clerk in Germany. And basically what he did was he daydreamed. He was playing, and how he came up with his relativity in terms of time and speed. He would imagine himself standing on a platform looking at a train, and what was happening in the train was happening at one speed, what was happening on the platform was at another speed. So he would just daydream, and he was playing through most of the time. That annoyed a lot of people, but Einstein was able to get into a creative flow state and play with ideas that now are part of physics.
For sure, yeah. Very interesting. So we have the capacity to really awaken extraordinary abilities in both healing and intuition that can really help us navigate uncertainties in everyday life. And along that line, it's very interesting, the military, particularly in California, at Camp Pendleton, is taking returning war veterans and doing a combination of psychotherapy and surfing. Why are they using surfing? Because they found when they take these war veterans surfing, the trauma tends to dissolve. Again, what's happening? They're in an alpha state.
Bilateral stimulation,
That's
because
right.
you have to balance on a surfboard with both sides of the body.
And there's something about being in water that is just amazing, and watching the rhythm of water, you know. And so this is going, this idea of healing with flow, stimulating peak performance, stimulating intuition is really happening now around the planet. So flow really is the source of psychological health, and when it activates, you see what happens is some of the brain goes offline. And we have another $25 word called transient hypofrontality. That means you just you're totally in the present moment. Your Stephen King movies stop running, anxiety disappears, all of the stress hormones decrease, and your inner critic stops complaining. Wouldn't that be nice? And your risk-taking goes up because you no longer doubt yourself. Your creativity goes up, and you're right always on the edge of insight, and sometimes that breaks through with gamma production. So that's why we really want to help people make sure that they are intentionally putting flow in their lives. And by the way, it's so important for clinicians to do the
Yes.
same thing, you know. So for you as a therapist also, begin to notice when your flow states occur, and I ask our clients to do the same thing. And then intentionally do those activities that will stimulate this flow state. Intentional flow is really crucial to well-being. So it really allows all the negative states to be short-lived, and oftentimes this results in physical healing. You know, Stephen Kotler talks about, author of Steel and Fire, talks about how he had Lyme disease for 3 years. He got actually suicidal because he couldn't feel better. And finally one day his friends came over and they said, "We're dragging you to the ocean." He said, "I can't go." They said, "We're taking you there." So they helped put him in a car, and then they helped put him on a surfboard, and he just sort of laid on it, you know. And he suddenly, after that experience, suddenly began to feel a little more energetic, and did that over and over again. Finally, he recovered from Lyme disease. So there may be something about the flow state that really even has a history to it. Well,
Do you want to review for that?
a review, and yeah, maybe in just a minute, but I just thought we might just mention that, you know, our field has focused on remediation, don't you think,
Right.
for a long time, and rather than transformation. And along this line, there we are telling you there have been 46,000 studies on depression and only 400 on joy.
And we mentioned in the studies about the monks, Young Emmanuel Rinpoche went on a 3-year retreat. Now, it always take 3 years to do that. But just in meditating, he cured himself from panic attacks. He didn't go out to do that.
Mm-hmm.
He set out on this retreat to get into a stable, enlightened state of mind.
Right.
So he was moving towards transformation.
Right.
And in the process, the panic disorder cleared up.
Right. So I was always astounded. Of course, you know, it's not fair to think like this because we're now in 2021, and to look back to Freud and to see, of course, he made a huge contribution to our field. But when speaking of the goal of psychotherapy, he said the goal is really ordinary unhappiness.
Transform neurotic suffering into ordinary misery.
That's kind of horror land, of course,
Yes.
in our minds today. But as we help clients live more in their parasympathetic system, their reality shifts to a desire to work through emotional conflicts and to live in healthier states of mind. So there's more and more research being done on the parasympathetic system, and we would just really like to encourage you to start to be aware of that. And by the way, there are brand new brainwave states that have been discovered we wanted to tell people about, and they're called lambda and epsilon. And they're kind of rare brainwave states that are associated with ecstatic states of consciousness. So that is sort of the awakening experience that some people have. So lambda are very high frequency brainwaves associated with wholeness and integration. And so we're just continuing to find very interesting things about the brain. And so we're thinking that we need a new model and paradigm in psychology to move to the next level of wellness. And so we're calling this
Regenerative
psychology, absolutely. Because regeneration is a living system's capacity to heal, to evolve to a higher level of functioning. And it's this universal pattern of how life has been able to build healthy, resilient, and adaptive individuals and communities. And so what does it mean to do regenerative psychology? It means to us to focus on what is the essence of a person. What is it that's unique to a client we feel like can be actualized and optimized, you know? And so there is this notion that we can have generative growth. And so the idea here is that we can't make the outer transformation in our life, in our community, until we really make the transformation in an internal way. So we're talking about, we've been talking about in these last couple of modules about how do you help people enter elevated states in order for their healing to really occur. And those elevated states are compassion, and empathy and joy. And so Bill, let's do this little experience with people.
Okay.
So you want to go through
Yeah, I want
that?
you to just take a few deep breaths. And after 2 or 3 deep breaths, I want you to think about someone that you love. Imagine breathing in and out through your heart, keeping the person that you love in the forefront of your mind. Breathe in and out through your heart. And as you think about the person that you love, expand the good feeling to the community in which you live. Going from the individual to your family, to your neighborhood, to the city, to your own community, maybe your state. And just feel that in your heart as you breathe in and out. Then expand the compassion and have it to your entire country. To the entire planet. All sentient beings. All people. Everyone enters into the world as a helpless infant. Everybody goes through different developmental stages. And everybody grows old. And everybody will reach old age and need help from other people. And take that compassion and extend it way out beyond the Earth, solar system, galaxy, the entire universe. And I don't know if you'll feel immediately or if it'll take a moment or two, but you begin to realize as you feel compassion, you experience a degree of connection towards everything else. You are a part of all it is. Is feeling that connection and compassion. So compassion to yourself and to other people really is the recognition of the reality. And while we may be different expressions of life principle, all of us, even in odd ways and shapes and forms, are connected to everything else. And as you come back and become aware of the world close around you now, just let yourself feel that sense and keep that sense of compassion.
And as you continue maintaining just for a little while that good feeling, you might have begun, if we had you hooked up to our EEG, to begin to have these bursts of gamma frequency that's associated with compassion and transformative experiences. And we'd like to show you what that looks like. Of someone who has been through a very similar experience, and you'll notice on this graph the theta waves, alpha, beta, gamma is starting to show up there. As a person goes deeper and into elevated states,
You'll notice the bursts.
There they go. They focus on compassion. Very deeply relax. And you're seeing a transformative state there in the gamma region. The person's feeling so connected to others, herself. And we wanted to just give that experience to you. So, as you think about working with the client's unique essence and how we can help that person contribute to the world as opposed to what diagnosis, and to come from that perspective, what the person's potential is, what their resources are. We've really been, throughout this course, talking about how do you activate superpowers of what's already there.
Right. You activate more alpha and theta activity. How, as a therapist, you meet your client at the doorstep of their reality, 1 foot in, with your own compassion, your own curiosity, your own ability to maintain a fairly calm state of arousal, so that your calmness, your curiosity models for your client in a room with 2 frequencies who are both frequency beings. The most stable models for the less stable and invites that other person's frequency to become more balanced and more coherent. So you as a therapist, as you enter into the room, you validate the concern like you did with your veteran. You validate the concern and you walk at a level, at a pace that they can tolerate. Not too fast, not too slow. And so your curiosity, your compassion allows you to see them, validate, and then ask questions like you did of, what do you do when you get up? What do you notice in that tree? It's then allowed your client to be able to look at, oh, something was happening that he was overlooking because of the tremendous loss that he had. And so once he found that, he wasn't told that he had that, he discovered that himself. So as you help change the brain state, or invite them to change the brain state, then change takes place. It's like Tiffany and J.C. Penney. She was caught on a thought, caught on a feeling, caught in a brain state, and the game that we played, the humorous game, allowed her to correct me from being wrong, having my, as she said, backwards, allowed her to focus away from the problem state and get into a more state of play that allowed us to leave the store without a major problem. And to then notice your client, as we noticed Tiffany was solving problems with Freddy Krueger. People will do things, and if what they're doing is not harmful to somebody else, to be curious as what are they attempting to do and how are they doing this, and do I need to help them change it just a little bit to tweak that so they can become to do it more skillfully than before. So again, we look at, as Milton Erickson did, that what we're doing is helping a person reconnect with resources that they have, and not only courage, compassion, initiative, so on and so forth, but the ability to shift brain states. Any insight that takes place, whether we're talking to the person about their thinking or whatever, what we're really doing is helping them shift and make a state change. Remember, all behavior is state dependent.
And we're helping people really move toward a greater sense of aliveness. And I really like a question you ask a lot, which is, what is the person trying to learn with this behavior, these emotional states? What direction are they really trying to move toward? So we've tried to help you identify your brain superpowers, and there are even more abilities that every human has that makes everybody remarkable, more than we've talked about. For example, most people think we just have 5 senses, whereas probably we have at least 21, which we won't go over right now. But when we help train the client's body mind to live in a steady state of calmness, many problems clear up. And so then people have the opportunity to move into a quest for personal mastery. So, we're wired for extraordinary living, really. But most people never really get past the everyday Groundhog Day, so to speak. So we want to encourage you to consider where you can really go with the people you work with, and we want to suggest to you that you get in touch with your inner Harry Potter,
your inner magician,
as a clinician, that you come with us down the rabbit hole to the other side of imagination, which is your life in possibility becoming reality. And that you go out and use your magic to help others. So thanks so much for joining us on this course on the neuroscience techniques. And if you'd like to stay in touch with us, this is our website, and you can give us your email, and we'd love to send you our newsletter or podcast. And gosh, thanks for being here.
And we hope that you continue to have fun, you continue to embrace your curiosity, embrace the flow state, so that whenever you meet with other people, whether they be supervisees, clients, or just your neighbors, that what you're able to do, your commitment to your own growth, your commitment to using the best of your brain, communicates to other people, not just a reduction in symptoms. That may be what brings a person there, but to move into a whole brain state so that what they have is generative or regenerative learning in a way that helps them move beyond what they ever thought that they could be involved with.
So from our heart
To theirs.
thank you very much.
Thank you very much.